Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Baseball Podcast. I am Ryan Warmley, joined by Chris Welsh. It is still November. We are very much in football mode right now, but we are also thinking about baseball. We've had some awards announcements coming out lately. We are just a couple of weeks away, Welsh, from the winter meetings, which I have very fond memories growing up as just one of the most fun weeks of the year and just kind of following all the twists and turns. I remember there was one year the Orioles were talking to Prince Fielder when I was in college, and it was really exciting imagining, all the fun transactions we could see. So we are, not as far away as you might think from some real fantasy baseball discussion. We are bringing you folks some fantasy baseball podcasts in the offseason here, kind of tide us over before we really dive deep in January. You've been doing a couple of these shows already, Welsh, with Joe Arico, some other short form videos. And we decided to get you and me together here to talk about some dynasty risers and fallers.
Yeah, and also baseball, we're in football mode, but I'm always in baseball mode. People know, like, the Arizona Fall League just ended, so I'm dealing with this. This is my seasonal depression because then baseball actually just ended for me. But, from a dynasty perspective, watching a bunch of top prospects that are going to have some dynasty impact here, and I'm excited to do this, and we're doing more baseball than we've ever done. And, funny you mentioned the winter meetings. In my previous life, I had a corporate job, that the hotel next to it was the hotel that players, basketball and baseball players, would go to. And they had the winter meetings here in Arizona, and they would go at that hotel for one or two of the years, I want to say, when I was at that company. And I remember if you went down, you would just see guys. You would see just owners, and you would see players. I remember Brian Wilson, famously, the big bearded closer for the Giants. It was like 100. I guess this wasn't winter meetings, but it was 110, him walking around with his shirt out and just jeans and doing all that. But the winter meetings, these guys all walking around, felt very intimate in that I got to almost be a part of it. But we're going to have a bunch of moves. All of this and the transactional changes from teams to player values is pretty exciting. And you know what? We say it's only November and baseball is still a little bit of ways. It's already going. Drafts are going. NFBC is going. I'm excited to do it. And I'm very excited to talk dynasty with you.
Yeah, I love Dynasty. This is the fantasy sport that I most enjoy, the Dynasty Keeper League type of format. I do play in some of those for like college basketball even, but football, obviously. But baseball is really where, the prospects are just so much of a bigger part of the experience of playing fantasy baseball than, there's not minor leagues for football, right? It's just college guys coming in. So it's a different experience doing Dynasty in baseball. That's one of the reasons why this is the show I wanted to hop on with you. I love talking through the long-term value and risers and fallers in this sort of format. Let's dive right in. We're going to do risers. We'll go 5-1. Then we'll give you some fallers 5-1. These are going to be Welsh's picks. So we'll just kind of talk them out and why we feel the way we feel about them. Then at the end of the show, we're going to give an all-dynasty riser team. I thought that would be a fun, quick little thing at the end where we give you one guy at each position who kind of builds out the team of guys that are rising. Now, before we dive in, just to give kind of the framework of the episode for people, are you viewing these, and these are the names you put together, are you viewing them as guys who rose the most last year, or guys who you think are poised to rise the most this year, or some kind of in between, just like in the middle of rising right now and then falling when we get to that segment?
That's a great question. So I view these as the big change year over year for people to understand. We kind of did something similar in the redraft of, hey, familiarize yourself. These are players last year that have really changed their rank into upcoming year's drafts. These are players that their dynasty value year over year has had a major change. And, that can come from players that, it's really difficult with prospects and young guys that it's like younger players are going to rank a lot higher in dynasty just in general. But even some of these young guys have just taken another step in their value. So again, there's a bigger, longer question about these players breaking out, but no, this is going to be the biggest changers of their dynasty value to start last year, if you were starting a fresh one, to this year. And the same thing with the guys that are falling. Those are players that ranked probably from anywhere from a decent amount to quite a bit higher last season. And then due to this most recent season age, things we're going to talk about have fallen in the ranks. Whether that is you guys restarting and starting up a new dynasty draft, which I highly suggest if you have not played dynasty, like Worm is saying, you should. I think it brings life even more to fantasy baseball if ever you've been fringy about it. But whether you're starting up or you want to understand values, because in the offseason, you're going to get the Hawks, the Sharks are going to be circling around trying to get your players. Hey, you know what? you should trade me Jackson Churio. He was pretty good, right? But he only had a da-da. They're going to be circling. So you want to understand the values, and that's my approach to this conversation.
My best, just quickly on a note, my best dynasty league. It's more of like a deep keeper league. You keep 14, at cost. My best one of those that I'm in, I have a $1 Bobby Witt Jr., a $1 Gunnar Henderson, and a $1 Jackson Churio. So I am feeling darn good about that league. Yeah, I think I only play one redraft league a year. Honestly, it's the work league. Like the rest, I do. I mean, sometimes I'll do like some of the contest stuff, but like in terms of just like an annual league with the same kind of friends, a group of people, I so largely do dynasty now. I just really prefer it.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because there's a couple. There's like you maybe played a long time and you might have this monster. I've had a couple of those where it's like your major guy. I had one is like Vlad, and I had Acuna and all those buildups. And then you have those teams that you've been working on. Mutual friend of the show, Scott White from CBS. He's got the long-term Scott White Dynasty leagues that I took over 3 or 4 years ago. It's a 2014 league. I'm going into this year finally. I drafted Paul Skenes. I got Corbin Carroll. I got Bobby Witt. I got Ohtani. I'm finally ready to compete. Yeah. And Skenes is kind of the big piece to it in a points league. So building up and finally being ready to go off of that dynasty is very rewarding, but also seeing the fruits of your labor 4 or 5 years in being like, look at those values. Yeah. That's what it's all about.
We are going to get to some Paul Skenes discussion later on, perhaps unsurprisingly. Let's start off with a prospect, though. Roman Anthony in the minors last season, 291, 396, 498 slash line. So almost 900 on the OPS there, just a little bit under. 18 home runs, 21 stolen bases. So kind of one of those dual threat guys. We'll start next season at 20 years old. What led him to being on this list as a prospect for you, Welsh?
So I think that's like the biggest question in general about and the evaluation of dynasty, specifically baseball. It's like, how do we fit in the prospects? Because like you said, there really isn't necessarily that in other sport dynasty leagues. For the most part, it's like you can just throw the rookies in, you can throw them up high, and there's usually maybe a year transitional period. That's not the case here. You can have guys, some people have like Sebastian Walcott, who's with the Texas Rangers, super young guy, or Leo DeVries with the Padres, just turned 18 years old. Those guys could be top 50 in some dynasty leagues. Those guys might not play for a couple years. So it's a different world. So with that, I also think the prospect rank world is not in agreement, and maybe more than it's ever been in a singular year. And what I mean is I think you check 10 different people that rank prospects, different number one, probably in 7 of those 10, probably a different number 2. So there's this big gap.
Well, you know why? It's because there's finally not an obvious Oriole sitting there at number 1.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I mean
I love Basayo, but yeah, the last few years, okay, well, it's clearly Gunnar. It's clearly Jackson Holliday. We finally don't have that this year.
We don't, and you're looking for those big threats, guys. So I'm building this all to get to the prospect, to say that when you look at prospect rankings, I think near the top, Jason Dominguez, Dylan Cruz, those guys have been there. Whether they're 1 and 2 on a list or 4 and 5, they were on dynasty rank lists already pretty high. A majority of the guys have come off the list. Walker Jenkins was another one. So we come to a player that rose dramatically in prospect rankings this year, and by some outlets is the number 1 prospect in baseball. It's Roman Anthony. So Roman Anthony, we've got to talk about from a dynasty perspective, because again, whether he is number 1 or he's inside my top 5, he's not my number 1 overall prospect. The guy hit AAA. The guy put up a monster season. Low K rate in AAA. It was under 20%. It was around 18%. He ran around 25% in AA. But projected steamer numbers are already out there. So after he just went out and hit 18 homers, stole 21 bases, both increases. He's increased, pretty much at every year he's been playing. Steamer has him for a light 50-ish games. But if we were to take Steamer's projections, which are usually relatively low on prospects, the 162 game pace is roughly 2015. 18-15, right in that general range. So I just want to give you kind of a perspective of where that's at. Now, they've got a quadrant of players that are in AAA. They've got Marcelo Mayer, they've got Christian Campbell, Kyle Teal, and Roman Anthony. All of those guys are on the precipice of coming to the majors. Maybe a couple of them get moved. It won't be Roman Anthony. I think Roman Anthony is the key piece to this team. Really good patience, huge, big, hard hit numbers. we'll have to continue to monitor like where the contact stuff goes as we get in, but it's big hard hit numbers. This team loves him, and there's a legit chance some of the trade options that this team has talked about in the offseason are guys like Willie or Abreu to open up spots. So we circle it all back to say prospects are going to shine and jump out to people on dynasty lists, and the top two, at least in my world, Dylan Cruz and Jason Dominguez, are already in the majors. So Roman Anthony is one that is going to fly out to you. I've got him inside my top 75. He has a legit shot to be up this season and beat Steamer expectations of games played. Could easily hit 100 or more, or maybe we get shocked because he hit AAA. And this team is open to putting him in the majors when we talk about the compensatory pick. So I say all of this to say, from a rank dynasty perspective, because he moved up so much on everybody's prospect list and has vaulted into the number one spot, he's going to rank somewhere between probably 35 and 85 on any dynasty list out there. And he's a super young AAA outfielder who does not have everything locked in, but is a big future of the game. And that's a massive dynasty change, just kind of across the landscape compared to the rest of the prospects that are out there.
Something like round 5, round 6 in a startup. Is that where you'd be eyeing to take him?
Yeah, so there's also a big conversation about like, how do you treat dynasty? Are you a win now? Are you a middle, like I'm going to kind of take pieces of everything, or are you going to be, I'm playing for the future? If you were playing for the future, Roman Anthony might be a 3rd or 4th round pick in dynasty. If you're just kind of median across the board, I would say like you kind of nailed that. Like I said, if I have him in the 70s and it's a 15 team league, 4th, 5th, 6th round, somewhere in there, it's a good future play.
Let's go to some of our major league players here who have risen up. Mark Vientos of the Mets, 27 home runs in 111 games, won't turn 25 until next month. 837 OPS, 135 OPS plus in 2024. Just like an awesome breakout season I did not see coming going into 2024. And now is somebody I'll be a lot more excited to draft in 2025. As far as the dynasty ranking goes, where do you have him?
So, yeah, I completely agree with you, too, by the way. Everyone thought this was going to be Brett Beatty. Brett Beatty was going to be the one like, hey, he's going to play a whole bunch. And Vientos had some big swing and miss issues, and he still does. So I have Vientos inside my top 100. I've actually got Roman Anthony a little bit higher. Totally could understand if someone's like, hey, that's underselling. Look at that power. He's 30-plus home run projected every single season. Not going to argue there. I think he's somewhere in that same general, like 75 to 100. I've got him specifically right at 91 right now. What I really love, he hits lefties and righties well. At least he did this past season. A phenomenal 14.1% barrel percentage and a 46% hard hit rate. Something I'm hyper focused on, especially impactful hitters. I'm always going to look at barrel percentage, and I'm going to look at hard hit numbers, because if you're barreling up the ball, hitting that on that really good spot, and you've got good hard hit, whether you are a pull happy or you're a Paul Goldschmidt type of contact hitter, good things are going to happen. So those are two really great recipes, and it played itself out in Mark Vientos last year. My worries, though, almost a 30% K rate. That is paired with a 40% whiff rate against anything, 40 plus percent against any non-fastball. So fastballs, he did his work with. Everything else he struggled with. And that goes with a 32% chase rate. So when teams are readjusting to him this year, you're going to probably see more breaking pitches. They're going to want him to chase because he's got a high chase rate. And if it's not a fastball, he struggles. So that to me mitigates maybe some of the batting average. It doesn't mitigate the power because I think it's pure, great raw power. And those are the things that hold me back from saying, hey, this is a top 50 prospect. Because guess what? If he dramatically improves on, his strikeout rate and hits for a higher average, it's kind of like Pete Alonso. Like maybe it's not as dramatic as of power, but it's kind of Pete Alonso-ish. So I think there is more up there, but I think there's some volatility. Projections, early Steamer projections, 242 with 32 homers. That's phenomenal. That's an easy top 100. Some might even take him top 50, but that's a huge dramatic year-over-year change, because I think a lot of people were writing Vientos off last year because of the whiff issues. But he just turned really quality at bats into big power, and the projected numbers see it carrying over.
So just quickly, because he's not on our list for the fallers, what does Vientos establishing himself as like the third baseman of the future for the Mets, what does that do to Brett Beatty, in your opinion, in terms of dynasty?
Well, I think it really hurt. I think it makes Brett Beatty a trade target.
Do you think he'll get traded?
I think there's a high possibility, but here's a caveat I'm going to throw at you. Pete Alonso's a free agent. If Pete Alonso doesn't
Yeah.
re-sign, Mark Vientos is the first baseman of the
Played some
future. And
first
then,
base last year, yeah.
yeah, and I think he might have actually played primary first base over both of those positions. So I personally kind of think that's where they want Vientos long term. And it's not to say that Pete Alonso is not going to re-sign. I
Sure.
think no matter what, Alonso re-signs or doesn't re-sign, I think Brett Beatty is up as a trade potential target. And let's say they go and sign Juan Soto, they're not going to do much else in free agency. So what's the best course of action? Take those prospect assets, go and take the Luis Angel Acuñas, take the Brett Beatties, maybe take some of those young pitchers, Brennan Sprout or Blake Tidwell, and make some impactful trades to pair with a guy like Soto if they do that. So I think either way, Beatty is kind of on the way out.
Welsh, there was one name when you sent me this list that I was kind of confused by. I raised my eyebrows at Junior Caminero, who was the next guy on this list. And he was the biggest reason why I wanted to ask kind of what the framework of these players were you're kind of looking at what we saw last year versus the future, because Caminero was obviously a very highly touted prospect going into last season. I drafted to stash him in a couple of redraft leagues, and it may or may not have panned out in those leagues, obviously. 6 home runs, 248, 299, 424 slash line in just 43 games at the big league level last year. Only 21 years old. I'm not saying we're giving up on him as a prospect anywhere close to that. But I was surprised to see him listed as a riser, because I thought he was pretty highly touted already. Comes in, didn't exactly set the world on fire, and now you have him as one of your biggest risers. So can you kind of explain that decision for us?
Yeah, I think this was like the toughest one. There are multiple players we could have put in this, and not that I was trying to theme out any of the picks, let's have this type of guy and this type of guy. But, you do look and you go, okay, Jackson Chourio, phenomenal rookie year. Let's go. But he was already ranked really high. Jackson Merrill was actually, that would be a decent one. Talked about on the redraft show, would have been a decent one to do as well. Jackson Holiday probably could have almost been in one of those fallers, but I think he kind of maintained. So here's the reason I decided to do it. So I do think that Caminero, for the most part, held, relative to last year, maybe he actually might have been as high as he is ranked right now. I think in season, he really, really fell off. He just kept not getting called up. I think there was the injury. He came up. He was decent in his time. Why I think I decided to do this was two things. I think he's firmly established in his rank range right now, without question. So I think I have him 24th in Dynasty. So that is a 2-round player, whether you're playing in 12-team or 15-team. But it is affirmed. It's not like, hey, we're putting, like last year, we're putting Jackson Holiday up in the top 25 and then they fall. I think those guys have a lot of wiggle room. The second was this. Of all the players that we're talking about here, specifically the risers and the major league guys, I believe that Caminero's difference between his redraft and dynasty value is the most dramatic. Give me Jackson Chourio, redraft and dynasty, close. Jackson Merrill, close. You keep kind of going through the list. Maybe Jackson Holiday would have been a little bit different as well. But I think there's a pretty big dramatic change between the redraft of Caminero this year and what his dynasty value is, which could throw people off. And the key points that I really wanted to focus, because I just wanted to talk about him, I said I love barrel percentage and hard hit percentage. Bam, 11.8% barrel percentage with a 45% hard hit rate he did in his rookie year, which you said wasn't really great. Came up late. It was okay. Hit 242. Didn't, knock anybody's socks off. Everybody didn't get crazily excited. I love that. Elite bat speed, 77.2 mile per hour bat speed. League average is around 72. That's at the tippy top of the league. An incredibly great bat speed while he barrels and hits the ball hard. Projections. This is the Steamer projections on him this season. 29 homers with a 262 batting average, 5 stolen bases, and 90 RBIs. Almost 30 homers off of that initial season, that rookie season that you saw. You take some of the underlying stuff with a massively boosted batting average and huge hard hit and bat speed. I really think he's established himself here. I will say this. I am worried about the batting average in general. Chase rate, 5% chase rate with a 42% breaking ball whiff rate. So he is going to get hit with probably more sliders early on, people pitching probably from behind on him, not trying to challenge him with fastballs. And I am a little bit worried he could get ahead of himself. But I think in general, my main point to this is there's a pretty big difference between redraft and his dynasty value, even though year over year dynasty value is closer. I think it was really important to talk about him because I feel like we got more answers of the important rookies last year, even in holiday struggles. And Churio and Paul Skenes, we're going to talk about all those guys. I feel like we got all the answers of the important prospects. We didn't. We got more. I think we have more clarity in Dylan Cruz with what we saw last year than what we actually got with Junior Caminero. And I felt it's important to reaffirm like his status as an elite future power bat. And we just got to pay attention to what that chase rate and what the batting average goes. But 24 in dynasty for me.
So in a startup, in a vacuum, you are taking him in what round?
Second round. Yeah, I'm taking him in the second round.
Okay.
Yeah, I will say like I tend to be more of a win now type of guy. So I'm okay with pushing like Jose Ramirez, Mookie Betts. Those guys are the real dicey guys early on in dynasties right now because it's like the 31, 32, where Mookie and Ramirez and Judge would be like, what, top 6, 7 picks in a redraft. Those guys can get pushed to the second. So for me personally, like if Jose Ramirez fell to like the middle of the second, I want to win now. I probably wouldn't. I mean, not probably. I definitively would not be able to pass him up to win now. So that's why he could fall off of my radar a tiny bit. But if I was more focused on young or I had these wheel picks, Junior Caminero is a massive target because he's super young. I think the power is going to get there. I'm just a little bit worried about his transition of like what the batting average is going to be and him improving his chase rate. But he was an elite hitter in the minor leagues. You just wish he stole more. It's kind of Manny Machado-ish. There's a little bit of Manny Machado in him.
Let's go to number 2 on the risers list. A guy I love, was not confused to see included here. James Wood, 9 home runs, 14 stolen bases in 79 games last year, 264 average, 781 OPS, just recently turned 22. I think he is going to be a fantasy monster for a long, long time.
Completely agree. And he was one of those dudes last year where it was just like, maybe he's 8, 9 in prospects, floated up to the top. And then he just had this monstrous start to the season. And then he gets called up and it was really everything that you wanted from him. 9 homers, 14 stolen bases, and just under 300 at bats. Love that he hit for average and his expected batting average was higher than his actual batting average, 264 to 269 batting to XBA, which you love. Already, he's putting up upper tier barrel numbers. Again, like the theme for me is if I get that pairing of like double digit barrel percentage with really good hard hit numbers, I love it. Well, 10% barrel rate in his rookie year, 52% hard hit rate. Absolute monster. Launch angle was low, like some rookies. It's actually very reminiscent of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He did kind of the same thing. Barrel, hard hit in his first couple years, and he'd have like a 5-degree launch angle or something.
That's
like
exactly what I was going to ask. With James Wood, a 2.4 degree launch angle. He just did the ball on the ground so much.
It's very uncommon. It's not uncommon. It's a very common rookie trait of, guys that are selling out to really like hit well. And that's like the thing that I loved about him. In the minors, he did the same thing, hits lefties. He's a big lefty, righty. He doesn't have like a lefty righty split, which is incredible. So this is one of those guys that I don't think is trying to sell out for power. Like I will tell you, I think Junior Caminero does like just ginormous, crazy fast bat speed that is just generating these big homers. James Wood was letting things come to him. And, that's what I think sometimes you hit kind of across your body and it's like doubles power. But that barrel and hard hit percentage, when that fixes, is going to look elite. Now, his K percentage has to come down, but a very encouraging number, 21% chase rate. One of the lowest in the league. I mean, it didn't qualify because he didn't play enough, but 21% chase rate. When I just told you the chase rate in the smallest sample size for Junior Caminero was 35%. So, there are some warning signs that people will be like, well, you didn't hit as much power as I thought. And he had a high strikeout rate. Launch angle fix, great hard hit numbers, low chase rate. That makes me feel phenomenal. And where he was probably floating between, 70, 80, 90, maybe the Roman Anthony range last year, he's 23 and maybe pushes into the top 20 right now in Dynasty. He's another one of those guys that it's like you can build this great young core. I think he's created some great baseline traits for himself that is going to continue to get great. And Don't be surprised when you get a 30-30 season out of James Wood in the next year or two. That's what's in play, and that's why he's a top 2 round player.
He was basically on pace for a 2030 season as a rookie with a 264 average, just turned 22. I mean, the sky is the limit for him. Truthfully,
Agreed.
I don't think you can put a ceiling on him. Speaking of guys who don't have a ceiling, number one, Paul Skenes, surprising nobody, or at least it shouldn't. Just a beast of a rookie season. I mean, an incredible rookie race in the National League this year. Paul Skenes does end up winning Rookie of the Year in that league. It was one of the seasons where you wish you could just give both rookie awards to National League guys and have the AL skip out a year because of how strong it was in the senior circuit. But yeah, Skenes, 133 innings, 196 ERA, 0.95 whip, 170 strikeouts. I mean, 22 years old. This was as a rookie, less than a year removed from being the number one overall pick in the draft. One of the best pitching prospects to come into baseball in a long time, and lived up to the hype immediately. There was absolutely no adjustment period necessary. Just a monster. So really, we don't need to sit here and give this effusive praise for Skenes because anybody listening to this show is well aware of how good Paul Skenes is. So I want to ask you this and frame it as, if in a dynasty startup, how many names, obviously you're not taking any pitchers ahead of him unless you want to correct me. I can't imagine you would. But how many hitters are you taking before Paul Skenes is getting drafted?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think the main point, just to reiterate, of bringing him up is to say he's he's almost the unquestioned redraft starting pitcher. I think some people are a little dicey because to pay a higher price for Skenes over like Skubal doesn't make sense to some people. It's not close in Dynasty. To answer your question, I have Skenes at 12, so that would be 11 hitters that are over him. Or if you want to be sneaky about it, Shohei Ohtani, two-way player. So, maybe there is a pitcher above.
Yeah.
Here's the only thing that holds him back, because based on what you saw with Paul Skenes, you could argue he's like top 3 or 4
you could argue. I wouldn't do this.
Can't argue. Don't do the number 1 overall, because I don't think you can do it.
I was going to say you could make an argument. I would disagree with that argument. I think you could make the argument. If you think that the gap between him and other pitchers for the next decade is as wide as it could be, I think you can make the case. I would not take him number 1 in a dynasty startup.
For a level of dominance.
I would listen to an argument, and then I would reject the argument.
So here is the problem with all of this is fun accolades. He's a pitcher. And that's ultimately the problem, why he isn't higher. You could be like, how can you have him at 10? So-and-so has him at 7. Great. But he's a pitcher in Dynasty. Like, the one thing you don't really want to do, especially if you are a young team, is build into pitching in Dynasty. I would also say, in a general sense, until you are closer or heavily competing, you just don't want to be weighted so heavy on pitching. Now, if you were to take Paul Skenes, great. You're locked down for a really long time. He's a phenomenal pitcher. I mean, 10th best WAR of all pitchers this past year. 120 pitchers. This was the number. I didn't coherently write this, but of 120 pitchers with 100 or more innings pitched this past year, Skenes had the lowest ERA. Of 100 or more innings pitched, 120 pitchers, lowest ERA. And he also made great strides. That sinker turned into what they call the splinker. It's just like a hard sinker that he throws in between like a split finger. It had the second best whiff rate among starting pitchers. Only Crochet was higher, and it was almost 30%. And it had a 20% K rate on it, which was top 10 among starters. Because the point is like sinkers don't induce strikeouts, which is insane. And Steamer projections for this year, check this out. He's number 1 projected in strikeouts this year off of his rookie year. There's no other pitcher. He is the highest strikeout projected. He also had the best ERA of every single one of those 200 plus strikeout pitchers, 5th best K per 9, and 2nd highest WAR projected to Jacob deGrom, which is hilarious. But the thing you need to know is Paul Skenes is the unquestioned first round type of talent starting pitcher, but ultimately he is a starting pitcher. So when you ask me that question coming back, how many hitters would I take above him? It is 10, because I don't personally, from a startup, want to build around a starting pitcher. I could see a scenario where I think buying pitching in Dynasty is a lot tougher than people make it out to be. I think some Dynasty people are like, oh, you just don't worry about it, and you just build all your hitting, and then right at the end, you can get your pitching. No, it doesn't work like that. In every Dynasty I've ever played, people are hoarding their pitching.
Yeah.
You could draft Skenes, and then knowing values drop a little bit, if you go and get, a Jose Ramirez, or you get a first round talent, and then you build around some more win now type of players, I think that's a better approach. That's how I would do it. I wouldn't want to be drafting Paul Skenes and then James Wood and da-da-da. I think the risk is too great. This is also one of the highest velocity fastball pitchers out there. He was pitched like a gajillion innings in college. We worry about that and the usage that's on him. So ultimately, this is back to that, like, built, pitching prospect, wanting to be heavily invested in pitchers, which I don't, but it's just not remotely close. He's the unquestioned top starting pitcher. He was already high last year, but he's the only guy that is deserved in redraft or dynasty to be even considered in the first round with age due to absolute dominance, due to his freaking second in the Cy Young. It's not even remotely close. He is a unicorn of unicorns of starting pitchers. So you could do that. Points league, this is a little bit different conversation, but ultimately a pitching prospect is really tough for me to put inside the top 10 with the volatility.
The case for Skenes going as high as you want to make it is that he's an outlier, which he may very well be. I mean, just for as dominant as he was as a rookie.
It's a unicorn argument.
You just don't see this. Having said that, I mean, I think back to where was Strider going in startups a year ago, and he's like 3 years older than Skenes is now, but like you couldn't have been more excited about a pitcher basically than Strider. And now that value falls away because of the injury. So not that it's entirely gone, but obviously it looks a lot different now. So, I mean, we'll put a bow on it just as a fun exercise. If the baseball gods came down and said to you, Chris Welsh,
I know
Paul Skenes is guaranteed health for his career. Everybody's guaranteed health. Injuries are a thing of the past now in baseball. Is he number one for you then, or still not?
I don't think he's number one, but he's like 3. If you guaranteed me
like Acuna because injuries are gone.
I think Ohtani, even though Ohtani's 30, yeah. Like I'm comfortable with Ohtani as the number one overall on Dynasty because he starts pitching again, and I know it's like a dicey conversation. Witt, I don't think I could take Skenes over Witt. Things start to open up a little bit between Acuna, Soto, Gunnar, Ellie. Like if I got 250 strikeouts for 10, if you said 10 years of health, and then it's going to open up after 10 years. Maybe it is number one.
What a 10 years it's going to be, though.
Yeah, it's going to hold down your whole rotation.
Yeah. Paul Skenes is amazing. We're not breaking any news there. I do want to break some news. We've got a special offer for everyone. Unlock a month of Betting Pros Premium for free. Download the Betting Pros app today. Use promo code FPFREE. Baseball might be done a couple months ago. There's still tons of football, basketball, and hockey to bet on. And soon enough, there'll be baseball to bet on again. Get access to tools like the Same Game Parlay tool, the Prop Bet Analyzer, and the Prize Picks Prop Bet Cheat Sheet. Don't miss out. Try it free for 1 month now, available on iOS and Android. All right, Welsh, as you and I are wont to do together, we went a little long on the risers, so go a little quicker on the followers. People also have less interest in the negative side of things. We had fun with the positive. We'll bring it down a bit on the negative. Number 5, Mike Trout, a super negative one emotionally, just because it's sadder and sadder every year to see him not be able to stay healthy. Fantastic start to 2024, low batting average, but 10 home runs in 29 games. Injured again, of course, missing the rest of the year, 33 years old now, and hasn't been truly healthy in, a half decade. So I assume age and injury is really the only thing going into this, having him listed here as a faller.
Yeah, it's pretty simplistic to that. I mean, he's 33 years old. He clearly cannot be healthy, and that's the big thing. And I want to preface this. This is kind of a me one too. I think there are other people, good for them, smartly, have kind of moved off of the Mike Trout, realm sooner. I am a little injury agnostic, where I just want to give benefits of the doubt, and I want to give benefits of the doubt. And here's my biggest struggle with a player is when a player is an incredibly awesome, unique talent every moment they're on the field, and then they get hurt. Jacob deGrom is another one of those. deGrom's a little different now because he's 36 years old, but Trout is in that range now. I have continuously given him that pass, but I think it is more than been proven these degenerative issues, he cannot stay healthy, and the team gets worse around him. You also saw, as good as he was, you saw some declines, massive hard hit decline this past year, 41%. It was I guess of his entire career, was the third lowest that he's ever seen. He was striking out quite a bit less, which is definitely a positive, but he was worse against fastballs, which is not something you want to see. And you just wonder if there's more of the I don't know, like a patient hitter that's in there that's not going to put up these big impactful numbers. And as age goes on, these guys are going to lose, just deteriorate a little bit. And it's like if you take away the big power from Mike Trout, and he doesn't have 40 home run potential, and now he's a 30 home run, high batting average. Like he's got bad players around him. So it's like, can you project 85 with 30 something homers, doesn't steal a whole lot? I know he did steal a little bit more this year. He's still 6, but there's not much stolen base potential, and he hits for higher batting average. Listen, that's third round, but that's a pipe dream because he can't stay healthy. He's never on the field. So all of those things combined, I held out hope last year, held out a little bit of hope in redraft. I was right for a month. Held out some hope in dynasty that, he's still top 75. Look at it's outside the top 100. I think that's the big key. I think some people are going to smash him into the 200s. I think if you are a win now team and you
would you trade for him if you're a win now team? Not even thinking to start up, but would you trade for him?
For cheap? For cheap,
Yeah.
I would be comfortable doing it if it was for cheap, but I think his name value, this might be the first year the name value really tanked. Like the name value was always there and people can make arguments. That might be gone. So maybe I would be a little bit more likely, but it's outside the top 100. But if you're win now, I think it's hard, like outside of that, if he's just floating around there, like go get that outfield. He's going to DH. Maybe he does stay a little bit healthier. That was the Byron Buxton argument, but we know he's going to hit the IL. But the big change is that I think everybody uniformed, everybody collectively got together and came off of Mike Trout in his dynasty value. It is post 100 in a dynasty draft, probably post 150.
Yeah. Next up, Luis Castillo turns 32 next month. He made 30 starts in 2024, went 11-12, 175 and a third innings, 175 strikeouts, so almost exactly identical there. 3.64 ERA, just a 101 ERA plus, so just barely above average in that metric, and a 117 whip. That's his worst since 2021. Is Castillo an age-related faller?
Yeah, well, it's twofold. It's age, 32-year-old pitcher. That doesn't feel real great. And that's paired with velo decrease. And those two things don't work super well. Now, it's changed before. I think Verlander went through this and kind of readjusted his career and refound himself. So I don't think that I really don't think like a lot of these guys are these damning, like they can never come back and never improve and you have to fade these guys. Like, no, I think it's just the value changes. I will be frank. I think there's multiple pitchers I could have chosen from. I was picking between them. There's a younger guy in Zach Gallen that I think his value has changed. Logan Webb has come down. Aaron Nola has come down. But specifically Castillo hitting that 32-year-old marker, having arguably it's still a good season, but like one of the worst seasons. It's the second worst expected ERA that he has had in his entire career. 3 straight years of an ERA increase as well. And on top of it, the whiff numbers. So the velo went down, but the whiff numbers decreased across the board, almost across the entire board of all of his pitch types. So you had his fastball going down about a mile per hour. I think his slider did as well. And whiff decreases with the age. I don't love it. And he went from a guy that, regardless of the age, was probably top 35, top 40 last year. And he is pushing outside the top 80. And frankly, pending the type of rotation you're putting together, you might be better set with a Brandon Pfaadt. I think Yuri Perez, even coming off of his surgery at his age, is a better long-term investment. To me, Luis Castillo's value is in the team that I am pushing back some of these young players and I'm trying to win now. You can push him up, but I think there's some bad trends in the wrong direction for Castillo.
Luis Robert next on the list. Still only 27 years old, so not an age-related one here. 14 home runs, 23 stolen bases in 100 games in 2024. He had a 224, 278, 379 slash line. OPS plus 87, which was the first time in his career he was below 100, so below average. What went into including Robert on this list?
I'm not black and white in everything that I do. So when I tell you that a guy is fallen or rose up, I don't think it's the be all end all. I think there's a gray area in all of it that guys can fix themselves. And if there's a player on the decrease that can improve themselves, it's Luis Robert. Age is in his favor. Pretty big productive years are in his favor. But last year, it was such a stark scary reminder of how bad it can be. And maybe you chalk it up to like you're playing on one of the worst teams of all time. You're not invested. He was injured. He was playing out here I saw him multiple times playing in complex league. You know, his friends were gone. Eloy was traded. Moncada was a disaster. Like, I think there's a personal element of it. Maybe he just wasn't interested because it didn't seem like it. But the stats tell that story full on. 33% K rate. That's the worst. Barrel percentage dropped to 9%, which was the lowest of his career, but he had a career worst 5.9 barrels per plate appearance. That's like, I think the lowest before that was like 7.1. Bottom 6th percentile of the league in expected batting average of 210, even worse. His hard hit rate crashed to 40.7%, which was the second worst of his career, and that was a 2% decrease year over year. Those trends all combined are scary and bad. Could he fix it? Sure, if he is more motivated. Projections actually tell the story that he will. They see a bounce back, 240 with a 28-28 season. Why is that though? Because projections usually will work off of modeled 3-year performances. And if you take the 3 years, there's some big performances in there. But I think what we saw out of Robert last year scares the hell out of me. So I had him massively high. Talent is unquestioned. Top 25, top 20, I think I had him last year. I'd knocked him out of the top 75 because these things worry the ever-living crap out of me for Dynasty to have that investment. If he fixes it, going to try to quickly make a turn, but I think these trends are going in a really bad direction.
And you could hardly blame him if it was any kind of just mental burden of playing for that White Sox team. Like
And I
anybody else.
acknowledge that. Like that might be part of it. And that might be why he's maybe a buy. Maybe he's a sneaky buy if everyone is off of him.
Another older pitcher, Gerrit Cole, only made 17 starts, obviously, after he missed the start of the season in 2024. That's the first time he's had fewer than 30 starts in a season since 2016, not including the COVID-shortened 2020 season. 34 years old, obviously. He went 8-5 for the Yankees, 3.41 ERA, 99 strikeouts in 95 innings pitched. Again, is this an injury/age related one for a guy who's been a regular first rounder in redraft leagues for a long time?
Yeah, like some of these guys, I think, again, there are people that are maybe different or treat some of these things different. I will give benefit of the doubt for super talented players. Age means sometimes a little bit less to me in Dynasty than other people. You know, if you're like 32, people are putting them outside the top 100. I want to win now, and I want those talented players. But Gerrit Cole is showing some pretty concerning signs. 5 straight years of decline in K percentage, which is down to 25%, while his walk percentage jumped up to 77.4%. Those combine, if you ever pay attention to K minus walk percentage, that's not good. That's not good. That walk percentage, by the way, was the second highest of his career. His expected ERA has risen 4 straight years, and like we talked about with Castillo, velo declines. He had about a full mile per hour on his fastball and slider go back down at 34 years old. I don't like those trends. He's still a talented player. He's still got things done, but it's not coming at the same velocity or impact of what it was before. And as you get older, you know, there's kind of that, like, do you adjust to be from a power pitcher to a kind of, maybe I'll call it like a finesse type of pitcher. And I just don't think that's there, and it's adjusted. And again, year over year, Gerrit Cole, regardless of age, I think was still seen as a top 2 to 3 SP in Dynasty. He is not there right now in Dynasty. I've got him right around 50, and that might even being a little bit generous, because if those declines continue to grow, it's going to have like a dramatic punch to what his value really is. And I wouldn't be shocked if he's like outside the top 75 here come next season. Frankly, if it was Luis Castillo at like 80 or Gerrit Cole at 50, I think I might even want Luis Castillo. I think those guys are closer now, where I just don't think they were before.
Last follower here. I was a little surprised by this one. Corey Seager, 30 years old, had 30 home runs in 123 games. So obviously he didn't play the entire season. He had some injury stuff he was dealing with. 278, 353, 512 triple slash in 2024. OPS plus of 145. So he was good when he was on the field, you know, particularly in those power numbers. But obviously, you know, a slightly shortened season. He's on the wrong side of 30, but it's not like he's in his late 30s. So can you explain this one a little more?
Well, his body, I think, feels like it's much older
kind of
than the early 30s. Yeah.
So stuff. Okay.
I love Corey Seager. Like, Corey Seager's change, and this is part of the rank change. I had him in the teens, regardless of his age last year, because you see this guy just big hard hit numbers, high batting average, over 100, 30 plus homers, hitting 320 or whatever. Like that's what I love. But he can't stay on the field. And we also saw declines in some of the performance. So here's my biggest worry. You're saying the wrong side of 30. He's going to be 31 on April 27th.
Yeah.
He might not be back until he's 31 because he had sports hernia surgery, and they said he will likely be back. Likely is a key term for the beginning of the year if there's no setback. And Corey Seager is the Mike Trout of future run injuries. He has had tons of injuries out there. So I am, if I'm going to be concerned about Mike Trout, I got to be concerned about a guy that has had a history of injuries as well. That team offensively on the decline. Also batting average had a little bit of a sink right now. I think, putting him at number one makes it feel super dramatic. Like Corey Seager is the biggest. No, it's just, this was a guy that I think you could have legitimately taken in the second round of dynasty drafts that I don't think you should consider until the fourth round. And you are taking some inherent risk with injury. So there's a theme to a lot of these outside of Robert, who I think is dramatically performance-based. It's looking for age to injury concerns that might have other little like velocity things, and having a major sports hernia surgery really concerns me about Corey Seager. I need those games out there. And I think you're just taking on some more inherent risk if you're taking him inside the definitely the top 3 rounds.
All right, well, let's go very quickly through our All-Dynasty Risers team. This is a team you put together. There's a couple of them that I'll highlight where I might have gone in a different direction. So just very quick on each of these. Catcher, who you got?
Cal Raleigh. I thought the catcher was actually really difficult because most of the catchers kind of like.
I totally agree. Value. I did not. I was like looking. I was like, is there a better one than Cal Raleigh? And there really wasn't.
You might know Samuel Basallo was like one of the higher ones I had, but I'm not going to put him on there. But Cal Raleigh changed his value by becoming a better hitter, big, impactful power. Cal Raleigh is definitely the guy at catcher.
First base.
Mark Vientos. We get to cheat a little bit because Mark Vientos, well, it's not really cheating because he did play primary first base. So if we talked about on this episode, I think he belongs as one of the highest first base risers in the land.
Second base.
This one, I wanted to talk about him in this, so I'm glad we got to put him here. Ketel Marte. This is an over 30 guy that I put on here, so don't be like, hey, well, you say you like to win now, but there's no older guys. 31 years old, but guess what? Ketel Marte became a fixture at second base, arguably one of the top second basemen to be drafted for next season. MVP candidate. He's a core hitter, did everything, hits the ball still hard and more consistent now. Ketel Marte definitely rose up in dynasty ranks this year.
You've got Junior Caminero at third. We already talked about him. How about shortstop?
Zach Neto would have been a player I would have loved to have talked about. The only caveat that's holding me back, he had an injury and he might miss a little bit of this the beginning of the season. But Neto was one of those dudes. Power, stolen base combo, 20-30, could be a 20-40 guy in the near future. Became a huge impact bat at the top of the Angels lineup. And I had this dynasty debate at the end of the year. A guy was trying to trade me Robert and he wanted Neto. And I was like, dude, I got Neto over Robert in Dynasty now. So Zach Neto is around a top 50 to 60 fantasy player, even regardless of the injury.
This is the position that I wanted to bring up somebody else. And maybe the guy I'm about to bring up is a year away from being on this list because he's a very young minor leaguer. And you actually already mentioned him earlier, and I was glad you did. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it right. Leodalis DeVries, is that the correct way to pronounce
Leo DeVries. Yeah,
Leo DeVries. Okay.
Leodalis DeVries, technically.
Leodalis. Okay. It's one of those names where you only ever really read instead of hear said out loud, but Leo DeVries. So I think he's going to be a top 5 prospect in baseball at some point in his minor league career. I'm over the moon about him as a prospect in Dynasty. Obviously a couple years away, but I felt like he really broke out in a way where he went from, oh, that's an interesting flyer to have on some deep Dynasty teams, to this is a priority prospect for me in any sort of prospect slot that I can afford to sit on it for a couple of years. So I really wanted to bring him up.
Yeah, I completely agree. He just played in the Arizona Fall League, one of the youngest. He was the third youngest to ever hit a homer in the Fall League behind only Ethan Salas and Bryce Harper. He's a phenomenal bat. I really switch hitter. Like, he's got a smooth bat, better than Ethan Salas's. I agree with everything you're saying. He's already he's the 6th prospect on my prospect list. So he's already like there. Dynasty, he is just 2 years away. I work in 3-year windows, but he is a guy that's valued right around that like 100 to 125 range. So I do agree. He will be a guy we're probably talking about next year.
By the way, I forgot to mention, I was going to mention you have Caminero obviously at third. I think you can make a case at third, in my opinion, for Jordan Westberg. We haven't talked about enough Orioles on this show.
Sure, yeah.
I did not have him that highly ranked in Dynasty. I thought he's a really solid player. I love having him on my team as an Orioles fan. I was more impressed than I expected to be with his consistency month to month in terms of better power than I expected from him. Obviously, he only had 18 home runs because he missed some time with a broken wrist, I think it was, when he got hit on the hand or something on a pitch. So those numbers look a little diminished. But I was really impressed with Westberg, and my estimation of him in fantasy grew a lot last year. So I did mean to mention him.
I would have if the All Rise team was to not include any of the players we talked about, which maybe we should. Westberg would have been the third baseman.
I was really impressed with him this year. At outfield, James Wood and Roman Anthony are two of the names. Again, we've already talked about them. Who's the third outfielder you have?
Well, I kind of prefaced it when we were talking earlier. Jackson Merrill, Jackson Merrill does deserve the huge bump year over year. And, I literally probably didn't mention him because we did it in another show. But from a dynasty perspective, Jackson Merrill, one of the biggest risers in value year over year. He's a 2020 guy. His power projection in Steamer is actually higher than what he did. So people are banking on that. Great outfielder that's going to continue to stay out there. Really good average. And he is, arguably probably top 35. He's a second to third round dynasty, if maybe not second round player. Maybe his offensive impact is less than like James Wood and Cheerio, but it's right there. So he's going to join Wood and Anthony for our all outfield riser dynasty team.
Yeah, he's a great call too. Paul Skenes, obviously a starting pitcher, and then wrap us up with relief pitcher.
Mason Miller. Maybe it's a little bit obvious, but closers are really difficult for people in Dynasty to figure out how to value them and what to do. Hader was a huge failure last year. The only one that really paid off for the high cost anyone would have done in Dynasty is Emmanuel Clase. Guy almost, he was in the Cy Young contention. So that I think is the tippy top. But Mason Miller is, if you are going to invest, my little strategy, probably don't draft a closer in any capacity inside the top 100, whether you're competing or, you're kind of just trying to build out your dynasty team. Don't do it in the top 100. If you were to invest, the two to invest are Emmanuel Clase and Mason Miller. Mason Miller didn't come into last year as a closer. He's still on the A's, which puts in question, but it's massive strikeout numbers. Guy's going to strike out like 100 every year. He's going to save whatever viable games are out there. And in a dynasty perspective, he might be the best bet of any closer, frankly, even over Clase, who's got a little bit of age on him. He might be the best bet of investment. So the all-rank risers, and probably the only closer that would be worth making a real investment on, is Mason Miller.
We'll wrap up there. Well, fun talking baseball with you. We talk football every week on Tuesdays with Erickson, but you know that you and I both have first loves are baseball. So,
well, you know what? You and I are kind of at the forefront of making sure, and hopefully people see this. Like, we want more and more baseball here at Fantasy Pros. We're giving
and Mayor, we'll give him some credit for pushing for it too.
Don't compliment Mayor at all.
He's my co-host on the cycle. I gotta help him.
He's a monster. But just letting you guys know, the passion is here, whether it's Dynasty or Redraft, and we got more for you than ever before. So make sure you are checking out the YouTube channel, which probably already are right now. But if you're listening on the podcast, youtube.com/FantasyProsMLB, more video content, more shorts than we've ever done in the history of Fantasy Pros, and we're going to keep doing it.
It's going to be an awesome 2025, and it's already starting now. Also, I forgot to mention this, and you reminded me before the show, so I apologize. Your Dynasty rankings are dropping December 1st. So for your Welsh's specific Dynasty rankings, be sure everybody listening, check out the site to hear what he has to say and see where he's got these guys actually ranked for your own startups and or off-season trades.
Do it, baby. Check it out. I'll put an article out, and it'll be on the consensus ranks, and we'll get all those bad boys cleaned up. All the baseballs. We're going to click more baseballs around us. Glad to talk some Dynasty with you, Worm.
We'll get out of there on that. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. He's Chris Welsh. I'm Ryan Wormley. We'll see you again next time.